I never thought retirement would involve a shovel, frostbite, and a lawsuit that would make my lawyer richer than I'd ever been. But here we are. My name is Jake Eastwood, and I moved to the Meadowbrook Estates in Buffalo, New York, 3 years ago. At 62, I'd worked my entire life as an engineer for a manufacturing company, saved every penny I could, and bought myself a nice little 2-bedroom house in what I thought was a quiet neighborhood. The house had a decent yard, a 2-car garage, and enough space for me to finally build that workshop I'd always dreamed about. What I didn't know was that the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association was run by a woman named Patricia Henderson, and that woman had made it her life's mission to make everyone else as miserable as she was. The first winter after I moved in was mild. We got a few dustings of snow, nothing serious. I shoveled my driveway and walkway when needed, kept my property clean, and minded my own business. I'd wave to neighbors, helped old Mrs. Chen next door carry in her groceries a few times, and generally enjoyed the peace and quiet of retirement. I spent my days woodworking in the garage, reading, and video calling my daughter who lived out in Seattle with her husband and 2 kids. Patricia Henderson first appeared at my door on a Tuesday morning in early November of my 2nd year there. She was exactly what you'd picture when someone says the words, HOA president. Mid-50s, blonde hair styled in that specific way that required weekly salon appointments, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit despite the fact that it was barely 40 degrees outside, and carrying a leather-bound clipboard like it was the Holy Grail. "Mr. Eastwood," she said when I opened the door, not bothering with pleasantries like hello or good morning. "I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board. I've been reviewing our records and I noticed you attended exactly 0 board meetings last year." I leaned against my doorframe, coffee mug in hand. "That's correct. I read the minutes online when they're posted. Everything seemed pretty standard." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "The HOA functions best when all residents participate actively. We have standards to maintain, Mr. Eastwood. Standards that keep our property values high and our community respectable. My property is well maintained, Mrs. Henderson. I pay my dues on time. I follow the rules in the covenant." "It's Miss Henderson," she corrected sharply. "And following the bare minimum isn't the same as being a contributing member of this community." I took a sip of my coffee, already tired of this conversation. "Was there something specific you needed?" She adjusted her grip on the clipboard. "Winter is approaching. I'm here to remind you that according to Section 14, subsection C of our HOA covenant, all walkways must be cleared of snow within 24 hours of snowfall cessation. I'm aware. I shoveled last winter whenever it snowed." "Within 24 hours isn't the same as promptly, Mr. Eastwood. Some residents were complaining that your walkway wasn't cleared until late afternoon during the February storm." I remembered that storm. 8 inches had fallen overnight, and I'd gotten up at 7 in the morning to shovel. "I cleared it by 9 in the morning. That's hardly late afternoon. Mrs. Pemberton from Unit 47 said she walked past your house at 2 in the afternoon, and there was still snow on the corners." "Because it was still snowing at 2 in the afternoon," I said, my patience wearing thin. "The storm didn't stop until 4. I went back out and cleared it again at 5. Patricia made a note on her clipboard, and something about that gesture irritated me more than it should have. "Just make sure you're vigilant this year. We have standards." She left without saying goodbye, her heels clicking down my front steps. I should have known then that she was going to be a problem, but I figured she was just one of those people who needed to feel important. I'd dealt with micromanagers my entire career. I could handle Patricia Henderson. The snow started in mid-December. Buffalo winters are no joke, and that year's forecast was predicting one of the coldest, snowiest seasons in decades. The first real storm hit on December 18th, dumping 14 inches of heavy, wet snow across the entire city. I was out at 6 in the morning, shoveling my driveway and walkway before the sun was even fully up. My back ached, my fingers were numb despite my gloves, but I got it done. By 8, my property was clear. At 8:30, my doorbell rang. Patricia Henderson stood there again, this time wearing a puffy white jacket that probably cost more than my monthly heating bill. "Mr. Eastwood, I need to speak with you about a community opportunity. It's 8:30 in the morning and I just spent 2 hours shoveling snow." "Yes, and you did an excellent job," she said, "and I should have known right then that a trap was coming. That's actually why I'm here. The HOA maintains the common areas of our development, including the walkways that lead to the clubhouse, the mailbox pavilion, and the entrance monuments. Our usual snow removal contractor informed us last week that they're discontinuing service to residential HOAs, something about focusing on commercial contracts." "That's unfortunate," I said, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "The board held an emergency meeting last night. Given the severity of this winter's forecast, and the fact that hiring a new contractor mid-season would be extremely expensive, we've decided to handle snow removal in-house." "In-house?" "Yes. We're asking for volunteers from the community to help maintain the common walkways." "You're clearly capable, you're retired so you have the time, and honestly, Mr. Eastwood, it would go a long way towards showing that you're a team player." I stared at her. "You want me to shovel the HOA's walkways for free?" "It's not for free. You'd be contributing to your community, helping maintain the property values that benefit all of us." "How much walkway are we talking about?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Not much. The path from the street to the clubhouse, the area around the mailboxes and the entrance monuments, maybe 300 feet total." 300 feet of walkway, after I just spent 2 hours clearing my own property. "And how many other volunteers do you have?" "Well, we're still organizing the schedule, but I'm confident we'll have plenty of help." "So I'd be the only one right now?" "Initially, yes, but once others see your excellent example, I'm sure they'll join in. Think of it as a leadership opportunity." I almost laughed. Leadership opportunity. That's what managers always said when they wanted you to do extra work for no extra pay. "I appreciate the offer, Miss Henderson, but I'm going to pass. My back isn't what it used to be, and clearing my own property is about all I can handle." Her expression shifted, the fake friendliness evaporating like steam. "I see. So you're refusing to help your community?" "I'm declining to volunteer for additional physical labor that I'm not obligated to perform. There's a difference. The HOA board will be disappointed to hear about your lack of community spirit, Mr. Eastwood. Very disappointed." She left and I closed the door, thinking that would be the end of it. I'd said no to plenty of pushy people in my life. This was just one more. I was wrong. 3 days later, I received an official letter from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. It was delivered via certified mail, which should have been my first warning sign. The letter informed me that the HOA board had voted unanimously to amend the covenant to include enhanced winter maintenance requirements, and that all residents would be expected to contribute to common area maintenance on a rotating basis. My name was listed as the primary volunteer for the month of January, with daily snow removal duties required for all common walkways whenever snowfall exceeded 1 inch. I read the letter 3 times, getting angrier with each pass. They couldn't just change the covenant like this. HOA covenants were legal documents, and modifying them required proper notice, homeowner votes, and usually a supermajority approval. You couldn't just announce a new rule because your snow removal contractor quit. I called the number at the bottom of the letter. Patricia answered on the second ring. "Miss Henderson, this is Jake Eastwood. I just received your letter about the covenant amendment. Yes, we wanted to make sure all residents were properly informed. You can't just change the covenant without a vote. That's not how HOA law works." Actually, Mr. Eastwood, if you'd attended any board meetings, you'd know that Section 29 of our existing covenant allows the board to implement temporary emergency measures during extraordinary circumstances without a full community vote. The loss of our snow removal contractor during the worst winter in decades certainly qualifies as an extraordinary circumstance. I pulled out my copy of the covenant and flipped through it. Section 29 did exist, but it was meant for things like emergency repairs to common property or temporary rule changes during natural disasters. This is a stretch, and you know it. The board's attorney has reviewed and approved the measure. If you have concerns, you're welcome to consult your own attorney, but the amendment stands. You're scheduled to begin your duties on January 1st. The equipment shed near the clubhouse has shovels and ice melt available. And if I refuse, then you'll be in violation of the covenant and the board will be forced to take appropriate action. We can start with fines, of course. $50 per day of non-compliance seems reasonable. $50 a day. That was over $1,500 a month. This is insane. This is community responsibility, Mr. Eastwood. Something you seem to struggle with. Your shift begins January 1st at 6 in the morning. The walkways must be cleared before 8, as that's when most residents collect their mail and visit the clubhouse. We expect daily maintenance whenever snow accumulates, regardless of whether it's actively snowing. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the next week consulting with a lawyer. His name was Richard Morrison, a guy in his 40s who specialized in property law and HOA disputes. He had an office in downtown Buffalo, and when I showed him the letter, he frowned. "They're pushing the boundaries of what Section 29 allows," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But the problem is that challenging this would require filing a lawsuit, which takes time and money. By the time we got a judge to rule on whether this amendment is valid, winter would be over, so I'm stuck. In the short term, probably. The good news is that if you comply under protest and document everything, you could potentially sue them later for forcing you into involuntary servitude or violating your rights as a homeowner. But that's a long shot, and it would be expensive. How expensive are we talking? Depends on how hard they fight. Could be anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 in legal fees, and that's assuming you win." I left his office feeling defeated. $20,000 to fight a woman with a clipboard and a power complex. It didn't seem worth it. January 1st arrived with a vengeance. Buffalo was hit with a massive winter storm, the kind that makes national news. 18 inches fell overnight, with winds gusting up to 40 miles per hour. The temperature dropped to 8 degrees, with a wind chill well below zero. I woke up at 5 in the morning, put on every layer I owned, and drove my truck to the HOA clubhouse. The equipment shed was barely insulated, and the shovels inside were cheap plastic things that wouldn't last 10 minutes in heavy snow. I grabbed the least broken-looking one and started working. 300 feet doesn't sound like much until you're trying to clear 18 inches of snow from it in sub-zero temperatures. Each shovelful felt like it weighed 50 pounds. The wind cut through my jacket like it wasn't even there. My back screamed with every bend and lift. By the time I finished the path to the clubhouse, my fingers were numb and my shoulders felt like they were on fire. Then I moved to the mailbox pavilion, then the entrance monuments. By the time I cleared the last section, it was 9:30 in the morning and I could barely feel my feet. The whole job had taken nearly 4.5 hours. I drove home, took the hottest shower I could stand, and collapsed on my couch. My phone rang at 1 in the afternoon. Patricia Henderson. Mr. Eastwood, I drove past the common areas this morning and noticed that while the walkways were cleared, there's still snow piled on the sides that's creating a poor aesthetic. The board expects a cleaner job tomorrow. I hung up without responding. The next day, more snow. 6 inches this time. I was out at 6 again, shoveling, my entire body aching from the day before. The day after that, another 4 inches. Then 3. Then 8. Buffalo was getting hammered, and I was spending 3 to 4 hours every single morning clearing HOA walkways, while Patricia Henderson sent me increasingly nitpicky text messages about my work. The corners near the mailboxes aren't clean enough. You missed a spot by the clubhouse door. The entrance monument walkway needs to be wider. People can't walk 2 abreast. By January 15th, I'd had enough. I called Richard Morrison again. I'm done, I told him. I don't care what it costs. I want to fight this. Fighting it now means you'll be in violation of the covenant amendment while the case proceeds. They'll fine you daily. Let them fine me. I'm not spending another morning out there while Patricia Henderson criticizes my shoveling technique. Jake, I'm going to be honest with you. Even if we win, the stress and cost might not be worth it. Have you considered just moving? Giving up my home, my workshop, everything I'd worked for because of an HOA president with a power complex? No, I'm not moving. If they want me gone, they'll have to drag me out. All right. Then let me present you with option 3, malicious compliance. I sat up straighter. I'm listening. You're required to clear the HOA walkways daily during your assigned month. The amendment doesn't say you have to do it well, and it doesn't say you have to do it at any specific time, just before 8 in the morning. It also doesn't say you have to continue volunteering after January ends. So I finish out the month doing the bare minimum, then refuse to sign up for February. Exactly. And when they try to force you into another month or fine you for not volunteering, we hit them with a lawsuit arguing that the amendment exceeded their authority and that they're engaging in targeted harassment. We'll have documentation of you complying for a full month, which shows good faith on your part, and we'll have documentation of them continuing to demand free labor beyond what's reasonable. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. All right, let's do it. For the rest of January, I showed up every morning and cleared the walkways exactly as specified in the amendment. Not one shovelful more. If snow piled up on the sides, I left it. If the paths weren't perfectly centered, too bad. I cleared enough for safe walking and nothing else. Patricia's text messages became increasingly frantic. Mr. Eastwood, this is unacceptable work. The board is receiving complaints. You're deliberately doing a poor job. I responded to none of them. I showed up, did exactly what the amendment required, and left. January 31st was a Friday. I cleared the walkways one last time, returned the shovel to the shed, and went home. That evening, I received an email from Patricia Henderson. Dear Mr. Eastwood, thank you for your service during the month of January. The February volunteer schedule has you listed for weekends. Please confirm your availability. I replied with a single sentence. I will not be volunteering in February. Her response came within 5 minutes. Your refusal to participate in community maintenance is noted. The board will discuss appropriate consequences at our next meeting. Let them discuss. February 2nd was a Tuesday, and Buffalo was hit with another major storm. 16 inches overnight. I woke up at my usual time, looked out the window at the snow-covered streets, and went back to bed. Let Patricia Henderson shovel her own walkways. By noon, my phone was ringing off the hook. I ignored it. By 2 in the afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Patricia standing there, her face red from either cold or anger, probably both. "You didn't clear the walkways." "I'm not scheduled for February. We need volunteers, Mr. Eastwood. The entire community is counting on people like you to step up." "Then the entire community can step up. I did my month. I'm done. The board can fine you for non-compliance." The amendment assigned me to January. "It's February. I'm not in violation of anything." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." She left, and I closed the door, feeling something close to satisfaction for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I received another certified letter. This one informed me that the HOA board had voted to extend the emergency snow removal volunteer program through March, and that I was being assigned to weekends in February and the full month of March. Furthermore, my failure to clear the walkways on February 2nd constituted a covenant violation, and I was being fined $50. I forwarded the letter to Richard Morrison with a note. "Time to file that lawsuit." He called me an hour later. "This is exactly what we needed. They've overstepped badly. I'll start drafting the complaint today. We'll sue for harassment, improper amendment of the covenant, and attempting to compel involuntary labor. I'm also going to file for an injunction to stop them from fining you while the case proceeds." "How long will this take?" "Months, probably. HOA lawsuits move slowly, but we've got a solid case." The lawsuit was filed on February 10th. Jake Eastwood v. Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association and Patricia Henderson individually. We sued for declaratory judgment that the amendment was invalid, an injunction against further enforcement, harassment, and emotional distress. We asked for attorney's fees, cost of filing, and damages for the time I'd spent shoveling under duress. Patricia Henderson's response was immediate and vicious. The HOA began finding violations everywhere on my property. My mailbox was a half-inch too far to the left. My house numbers weren't the approved font. My garage door was the wrong shade of white. Every single violation came with a $50 fine. By the end of February, I'd racked up over $2,000 in HOA fines. I paid none of them. Richard added each new fine to our lawsuit as evidence of retaliatory harassment. But here's the thing about malicious compliance that I didn't fully appreciate until it was too late. It goes both ways. March arrived with more snow. Storm after storm pounded Buffalo, and the HOA walkways went uncleared. Patricia tried to recruit other volunteers, but word had spread about what she'd done to me. Nobody wanted to be her next victim. The walkways around the clubhouse became impassable. Snow piled up around the mailbox pavilion until people had to wade through knee-deep drifts to get their mail. The entrance monuments were buried under massive snow piles. The HOA board held an emergency meeting on March 8th. I wasn't invited, but Mrs. Chen from next door attended and filled me in later. "Patricia was screaming," Mrs. Chen said, her eyes wide. "Actually screaming. She said you were sabotaging the community and that the board needed to take stronger action. She wanted to put a lien on your house." "Can they do that?" One of the other board members, Mr. Franklin, he said no. He said they were already in enough legal trouble, and that if they put a lien on your house for refusing to shovel their snow, the judge would throw the book at them. "What did Patricia say to that?" She said she didn't care. She said you needed to be made an example of. Then she said the board should fine you $1,000 per day until you complied. $1,000 per day. That was $30,000 a month. She'd completely lost her mind. The board voted down her proposal 4-1. Patricia was the only vote in favor. March 15th, the snow was still falling, and the HOA common areas were a disaster. The walkway to the clubhouse was buried under 3 feet of accumulated snow. The mailbox pavilion was inaccessible. People were parking on the street and hiking through the snow to reach their mailboxes. The entrance monuments were completely hidden. The community Facebook page was exploding with complaints, but most of the anger was directed at Patricia Henderson and the board, not at me. "Why did we fire our snow removal company?" one post asked. "This volunteer program was a terrible idea," another said. "Patricia Henderson needs to resign," a third declared with over 40 likes. On March 20th, I received a settlement offer. The HOA's attorney, a tired-sounding man named David Greenberg, called Richard Morrison directly. "My clients are willing to drop all fines against Mr. Eastwood and acknowledge that the emergency amendment exceeded their authority. In exchange, Mr. Eastwood drops the lawsuit and signs a mutual non-disparagement agreement." Richard called me with the offer. "What do you think?" "Do I get my attorney's fees?" I'll ask. He called back an hour later. "They'll pay $10,000 toward attorney's fees. I'm at about 15 in actual time, but 10 is better than nothing." "What about damages for the time I spent shoveling?" "They're not offering any." This is basically them admitting they were wrong but not wanting to pay for it, beyond dropping the fines and covering part of your legal costs. I thought about it. The fines they were dropping totaled over $3,000. $10,000 in attorney's fees meant I'd only be out $5,000 total. "Not great, but not terrible." "Counter-offer," I said. "They pay $20,000 in attorney's fees. Reimburse me for the cost of the medical treatment I've needed for my back since all that shoveling, and Patricia Henderson has to resign from the board." "They're not going to go for that last part." "Then there's no deal." I'm not living in a community run by someone who thinks she can force people into manual labor. Richard presented the counter-offer. David Greenberg called back the next day. "My clients reject the resignation demand. They're willing to go to $15,000 in attorney's fees and $2,000 for medical costs, but Miss Henderson's position on the board is not negotiable." We went back and forth for 2 weeks. In the meantime, more snow fell. The HOA common areas became even worse. Someone anonymously called the City Code Enforcement Office, and Buffalo sent an inspector out. The inspector determined that the snow accumulation around the mailbox pavilion constituted a public safety hazard and issued a violation notice to the HOA. They had 7 days to clear it or face daily fines from the city. Patricia Henderson tried to organize volunteer snow clearing parties. Nobody showed up. She tried to hire an emergency snow removal service. 3 different companies quoted her prices over $5,000 for a one-time clearing, and none of them could start for at least a week. The city fine started on March 30th, $200 per day. On April 2nd, David Greenberg called Richard Morrison with a new offer. $20,000 in attorney's fees, $3,000 in medical costs. All fines against Mr. Eastwood dropped, and Patricia Henderson will step down as HOA president. She'll remain on the board as a regular member, but she won't hold an officer position. "Why the sudden change?" Richard asked. "Between your lawsuit and the city violations, the HOA is looking at significant financial liability. The board has decided that Miss Henderson's leadership has become more of a liability than an asset. This is the best offer you're going to get." Richard called me. "What do you think?" I thought about it. Patricia Henderson, humiliated and stripped of her power. The HOA forced to admit they were wrong. My legal fees covered and then some. Add one more term. The HOA pays for professional snow removal service for the next 3 winters. I want it in writing that they'll never try this volunteer nonsense again. That's going to cost them a lot of money. Good. They should have thought of that before they tried to turn me into their unpaid janitor. The final settlement was signed on April 10th. The HOA agreed to pay me $23,000 total, covering attorney's fees, medical costs, and what Richard called general damages for emotional distress. Patricia Henderson resigned as HOA president effective immediately. The board voted to hire a professional snow removal company for the following 3 winters, with an option to extend. All fines against me were dropped and expunged from HOA records. The emergency volunteer amendment was formally revoked. I received the check on April 25th. $23,000. It didn't cover all the pain and stress of those months, but it felt like justice. Patricia Henderson moved out of Meadowbrook Estates in June. According to Mrs. Chen, she'd become a pariah in the community. Nobody would talk to her. People crossed the street when they saw her coming. The new HOA president, a retired accountant named George Franklin, was determined to run things differently. He sent a letter to all residents apologizing for the previous board's overreach and promising more transparent, reasonable governance going forward. I ran into Patricia once more before she left. It was a Saturday morning in late May, and I was working in my front yard, planting flowers. She drove past in a U-Haul truck loaded with boxes, her face visible through the driver's side window. Our eyes met for just a moment. I didn't wave, neither did she. Then she was gone. Mrs. Chen came over that afternoon with cookies. I heard Patricia moved out. I saw the truck. Good riddance, Mrs. Chen said firmly. What she did to you was wrong, trying to make you shovel all that snow for free. My husband and I were talking about it, and we decided if she'd stayed, we would have moved. We don't want to live somewhere where the HOA thinks they can treat people that way. I appreciate you going to those board meetings and keeping me informed. That helped a lot. She patted my arm. That's what neighbors do. We look out for each other. Life in Meadowbrook Estates improved dramatically after Patricia left. The new board was reasonable and professional. They handled actual problems like broken streetlights and common area maintenance without inventing new ways to harass residents. I attended a few board meetings just to stay informed and found them boring in the best possible way. No drama, no power trips. Just people trying to maintain a decent community. My daughter called one evening in July, and I told her the whole story. She'd known bits and pieces, but I hadn't wanted to worry her with all the details while it was happening. Dad, that's insane. She actually tried to make you shovel snow every day for free, every single day, and then criticized how I did it. You should write this down somewhere. It's like a horror story about HOAs. I've been thinking about it. Maybe I will. Did you ever find out why she targeted you specifically? Like, was it just because you didn't go to meetings, or was there something else? That was a good question, and one I'd wondered about myself. I think she needed someone to push around. Some people get a little bit of power and it goes straight to their heads. She probably thought I'd be an easy target because I'm retired and live alone. She didn't expect me to fight back. I'm proud of you for fighting back, Dad. A lot of people would have just given up or moved. I thought about moving, but this is my home. I worked too hard for it to let someone like Patricia Henderson chase me away. The following winter was everything that previous winter should have been. The first major snowfall hit in mid-December, and I woke up to the sound of a professional snow plow clearing the HOA common areas. I looked out my window and watched a crew of 3 people efficiently clearing the walkways with proper equipment. They were done in under an hour, and the paths were clean and wide and perfectly maintained. I cleared my own driveway and walkway at a reasonable pace, took my time, and didn't hurt my back. That evening I sat in my workshop, working on a wooden jewelry box I was making as a Christmas present for my daughter, and felt genuinely content for the first time in over a year. George Franklin, the new HOA president, stopped by a few days before Christmas with a plate of cookies his wife had baked. "Just wanted to check in and make sure you're doing all right," he said. "I know last winter was rough. I'm doing fine. The new snow removal service is working out well. We should have done it that way from the start. Patricia's volunteer idea was always a bad plan, and I should have pushed back harder when she proposed it. I'm sorry you had to go through all that. I appreciate you saying that. We're trying to do better. The board is. We're actually putting together a committee to review all our HOA rules and make sure none of them are unnecessarily burdensome or outdated. If you're interested in joining, we'd love to have your input." I thought about it. A year ago, I would have said no immediately. Too much drama, too much hassle. But George seemed genuine, and maybe it would be worth being involved to help prevent another Patricia Henderson situation. "Sure, I'll join the committee." "Excellent. First meeting is January 10th. I'll send you the details." The Rule Review Committee ended up being one of the better decisions I made. We went through the entire HOA covenant page by page, identifying outdated rules, clarifying ambiguous language, and removing provisions that gave the board too much unchecked power. That Section 29 Emergency Powers Clause that Patricia had abused. We rewrote it to require a full homeowner vote for any emergency measure lasting longer than 30 days. We also added specific language prohibiting the HOA from demanding unpaid labor from residents beyond basic property maintenance of individually owned units. The revised covenant was presented to the community in March and passed with over 80% approval. Meadowbrook Estates had become a genuinely pleasant place to live. I heard through Mrs. Chen that Patricia Henderson had moved to a condo in Rochester. No HOA there, apparently. Just a simple condo association that handled building maintenance and nothing else. Maybe she'd learned something from the whole experience, though I doubted it. People like Patricia rarely changed. My lawyer, Richard Morrison, sent me a Christmas card that year. Inside, he'd written, "Thanks for the interesting case. I've already had 2 more clients come to me with HOA horror stories after seeing your case in the news. You started something good." I hadn't realized our lawsuit had made the news, but when I searched online, I found several articles about it. Retired engineer defeats HOA in snow shoveling dispute. Buffalo man wins $23,000 in HOA overreach case. The comments sections were filled with people sharing their own HOA nightmares and applauding the outcome. One comment stuck with me. HOAs can be great when they're run by reasonable people who remember they're serving the community, not ruling over it. This is what happens when you get power-hungry board members who forget that basic principle. That was it exactly. HOAs weren't inherently evil. They served a purpose, maintaining common areas and protecting property values. But when someone like Patricia Henderson took control and forgot that she was supposed to be serving her neighbors, not commanding them, things went bad quickly. The workshop in my garage finally got finished that spring. I built custom cabinets, installed a proper workbench, and organized all my tools. It became my refuge, the place where I could work with my hands and create things and forget about the stress of the previous year. My daughter and her family came to visit in June. My grandkids, Emma and Lucas, spent hours in the workshop with me, learning how to sand wood and use basic hand tools. Emma, who was 9, decided she wanted to build a birdhouse. We spent 2 days working on it together, measuring and cutting and assembling. When it was finished, she painted it bright blue with yellow flowers. "This is going in our backyard in Seattle," she announced. "And I'm going to tell everyone that Grandpa and I built it together." Those were the moments that made everything worthwhile. Not the lawsuit settlement, not the victory over Patricia Henderson, but this: family, peaceful retirement, the freedom to spend my time on things that mattered. Lucas, who was 7, was more interested in the snow story. "Did you really let the snow bury everything, Grandpa?" "I really did. After I finished the month I'd agreed to, I stopped shoveling the HOA walkways. And the mean lady got mad, very mad. But you won, eventually, yes." "Good, mean ladies shouldn't win." Out of the mouths of babes. My daughter pulled me aside before they left. "You seem happy, Dad. Happier than you've been in a while." "I am happy. It took some fighting to get here, but I am." "Are you going to stay in Buffalo? I know we've talked about you maybe moving closer to us in Seattle." I'd thought about it. Seattle had better weather and being near my grandkids was tempting. But Buffalo was home now. I'd fought for this house, this community. I'd put down roots. "I think I'm going to stay, at least for now. You're always welcome to visit, and I'll come out to Seattle a few times a year." She hugged me. "As long as you're happy, that's what matters." The second winter after the lawsuit was even quieter than the first. The professional snow removal service returned, the walkways stayed clear, and I never once had to shovel anything beyond my own property. George Franklin continued as HOA president, running efficient meetings and handling problems without drama. I stayed on the Rule Review Committee, which met quarterly to address any issues that came up. In February, Mrs. Chen knocked on my door looking worried. "Jake, I need advice. The board wants to raise the HOA dues by $20 a month to cover increased insurance costs. Some people are upset about it and talking about fighting the increase. Do you think it's reasonable?" I looked at the budget documents she showed me. The insurance costs had indeed gone up significantly, and the HOA's reserve fund was lower than it should be. $20 a month is reasonable for what we get. The snow removal alone is worth it. Tell the people complaining that if they want professional services, they have to pay for them. The dues increase passed with minimal opposition. Turns out most people were willing to pay a little extra to maintain their property values and avoid disasters like the previous board had created. I ran into David Greenberg, the HOA's former attorney, at a coffee shop in March. He recognized me and came over to my table. "Mr. Eastwood, how are you doing?" "Well, no complaints. I'm glad to hear it. I wanted to apologize for how that whole situation played out. Patricia Henderson was a difficult client and the board should have reined her in much sooner." "You were doing your job, representing your client." "I was, but there's representing your client and there's enabling bad behavior. I should have pushed back harder when she wanted to implement that volunteer program. It was always legally questionable." "Why didn't you?" he sighed. "Honestly, because she was paying me, and I told myself it wasn't my job to make moral judgments. But after your lawsuit, I started being more selective about HOA clients. If a board seems like they're more interested in wielding power than serving their community, I decline the representation now." "Good. The world needs fewer Patricia Hendersons." "Agreed. Take care, Mr. Eastwood." Spring came, then summer, then another fall. Life continued peaceful and unremarkable in the best possible way. I built more furniture, took up vegetable gardening, started attending a weekly poker game with George Franklin and some other neighbors. Mrs. Chen and I carpooled to the grocery store every Thursday. I video called my daughter and grandkids every Sunday evening. It was the retirement I'd always imagined, the one I'd worked 40 years to earn. One evening in October, I was sitting on my front porch, drinking coffee and watching the sun set when a young couple walked past. They were looking at houses, clearly prospective buyers. They stopped in front of the house 2 doors down that had recently gone up for sale. "This neighborhood seems nice," the woman said. "Yeah, but it's got an HOA," the man replied, sounding wary. "I've heard HOA horror stories." I stood up and walked to the edge of my yard. "Excuse me, I live here. I can answer questions about the HOA if you're concerned." They walked over, looking relieved. "Is it one of those nightmare HOAs?" the woman asked. "We've been reading stories online and we're nervous." "It used to have some problems," I said honestly. "About 2 years ago, the board overstepped pretty badly. But there was a lawsuit, leadership changed, and now it's run by reasonable people. They maintain the common areas, handle basic community needs, and don't bother residents beyond that." "What kind of problems did they have?" the man asked. I gave them the abbreviated version of my story: the snow shoveling demands, the harassment, the lawsuit, the settlement. "Wow," the woman said. "But you stayed." I stayed. "Because after we fixed the problem, this became a great place to live. Sometimes you have to fight for what's yours." But it was worth it. They thanked me for the information and continued their walk. I went back to my porch and my coffee, watching the last light fade from the sky. 2 weeks later, I saw a sold sign in front of that house. The young couple moved in November, and I brought them a welcome basket with local honey, fresh bread from the bakery downtown, and a copy of the revised HOA covenant. "If you ever have concerns about the HOA, bring them up at the monthly meetings," I told them. "The board is open to feedback, and we've got a good community here now. Just stay involved and speak up if something doesn't seem right." They seemed grateful, and I felt like I'd done my part to prevent another situation like the one I'd endured. The third winter arrived, and with it came another heavy snow season. Buffalo got hammered with storm after storm, breaking records for snowfall. But the professional snow removal service handled it all flawlessly. The common areas stayed clear. Residents could access their mailboxes and the clubhouse without problem, and nobody had to sacrifice their body to manual labor in sub-zero temperatures. I cleared my own property when needed, took my time, and enjoyed the winter wonderland from the warmth of my house. My back didn't hurt. My shoulders didn't ache. I didn't receive a single harassing text message or nitpicking complaint. It was glorious. On Christmas Eve, George Franklin organized a community gathering at the clubhouse. Cookies, hot chocolate, a visit from Santa for the kids. I went, expecting to stay for maybe 20 minutes, and ended up staying for 3 hours, talking with neighbors I'd barely known before, laughing at stories, feeling genuinely part of a community. Mrs. Chen found me near the end of the evening. "This is nice. This is what it should have been all along." "It is nice," I agreed. "You made this possible, by standing up to Patricia. If you'd just given in, she'd still be running things her way, making everyone miserable." I hadn't thought of it like that, but maybe she was right. Sometimes standing up to bullies wasn't just about protecting yourself. It was about protecting everyone who came after you. My daughter called on Christmas morning. "Merry Christmas, Dad. What did you end up doing last night?" Community party at the HOA clubhouse. "It was actually really nice." "Look at you being social. I'm proud of you. It's a good community, sweetie. We had to work to make it that way, but it's good now." "Any regrets about staying instead of moving to Seattle?" I looked around my house, at the workshop I'd built, at the comfortable life I'd created. Not a single one. After we hung up, I sat in my living room looking at the Christmas tree I'd put up, thinking about the past 3 years. The fight with Patricia Henderson, the lawsuit, the settlement, the changes that followed. It had been exhausting and stressful, and at times I'd wondered if it was worth it. But sitting there in my home, in my community, I knew the answer. It had been worth every moment. Because sometimes you have to fight for what's right. You have to stand up to people who abuse their power. You have to refuse to be bullied into submission. And when you do, when you stand your ground and force change, you don't just win for yourself. You win for everyone. The snow fell outside, soft and peaceful, blanketing everything in white. Inside, I was warm and content, surrounded by the life I'd built and fought to keep. Patricia Henderson had demanded I shovel her walkways daily. So I'd quit, let the snow bury their front doors, and taught an entire HOA board that residents weren't servants to be ordered around. We were homeowners, taxpayers, community members with rights and dignity. And in the end, justice had prevailed. I got up, poured myself another cup of coffee, and looked out at the winter wonderland. The professional snow removal crew would be by tomorrow morning, clearing the walkways, doing the job right. The HOA would function smoothly and professionally. The community would thrive. And I would enjoy my retirement, exactly as I'd planned, without anyone demanding I shovel their snow ever again. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well, standing your ground, and refusing to let anyone take away what you've earned. That's what I'd done. That's what I'd keep doing. And life, finally, was exactly as it should be.